They thought they were free. This is an excerpt from the book called They Thought They Were Free. The Germans, 1933 through 1945, by Milton Mayer. But then it was too late. What no one seemed to notice, said a colleague of mine, a philologist, was the ever-widening gap after 1933 between the government and the people. Just think how very wide this gap was to begin with, here in Germany. And it became always wider. You know, it doesn't make people close to their government to be told that this is a people's government, a true democracy, or to be enrolled in a civilian defense, or even to vote. All this has little, really nothing, to do with knowing one is governing. Quote, what happened here was the gradual habituation of the people, little by little, to being governed by surprise, to receiving decisions deliberated in secret, to believing that the situation was so complicated that the government had to act on information which the people could not understand, or so dangerous that even if the people could not understand it, it could not be released because of national security. And their sense of identification with Hitler, their trust in him, made it easier to widen this gap and reassure those who would otherwise have worried about it. This separation of government from people, this widening of the gap, took place so gradually and so insensibly, each step disguised as a temporary emergency measure, or associated with true patriotic allegiance or with real social purposes. And all the crises and reforms, real reforms too, so occupied the people that they did not see the slow motion underneath of the whole process of government growing remoter and remoter. You will understand me when I say that my middle-high German was my life. It was all I cared about. I was a scholar, a specialist. Then suddenly I was plunged into all the new activity as the university was drawn into the new situation. Meetings, conferences, interviews, ceremonies, and above all, papers to be filled out. Reports, bibliographies, lists, questionnaires. And on top of that were the demands in the community, the things which one had to, was expected to, participate, that had not been there or had not been important before. It was all rigmarole, of course, but it consumed all one's energies, coming on top of the work one really wanted to do. You can see how easy it was then not to think about fundamental things. Fundamental things. One had no time. Those, I said, are the words of my friend the baker. One had no time to think. There was so much going on. Your friend the baker was right, said my colleague. The dictatorship and the whole process of its coming into being was above all diverting. It provided an excuse not to think for people who did not want to think anyway. I do not speak of your little men, your baker, and so on. I speak of my colleagues and myself, learned men, mind you. Most of us did not want to think about fundamental things, and never had. There was no need to. Nazism gave us some dreadful, fundamental things to think about, We were decent people, and kept us so busy with continuous changes and crises, and so fascinated, yes, fascinated by the machinations of the national enemies, without and within. National enemies are in quotes. Crises was also in quotes. That we had no time to think about these dreadful things that were growing little by little all around us. Unconsciously, I suppose, we were grateful. Who wants to think? Wow. To live in this process is absolutely not to be able to notice it. Please try to believe me. Unless one has a much greater degree of political awareness, acuity, than most of us ever had occasion to develop. Each step was so small, so inconsequential, so well explained, or on occasion, quote, regretted, unquote, that unless one were detached from the whole process from the beginning, unless one understood what the whole thing was in principle, what all these, quote, little measures, unquote, that no, quote, patriotic German, unquote, could resent, must someday lead to. One no more saw it developing from day to day than a farmer in his field sees the corn growing. Wow, that's heavy. I'm going to read part of that sentence again. It's just got so much in it. ... Unless one understood what the whole thing was in principle, what the whole thing was, what all these little measures that no patriotic German could resent must someday lead to. One no more saw it developing from day to day than a farmer in his field sees the corn growing. One day, it is over his head. How is this to be avoided among ordinary men, even highly educated ordinary men? Frankly, I do not know. I do not see even now. Many, many times since it all happened, I have pondered that pair of great maxims, Principiis obsta and finem respis, resist the beginnings and consider the end. But one must foresee the end in order to resist, or even see the beginnings. One must foresee the end clearly and certainly. And how is this to be done? By ordinary men, or even by extraordinary men? Things might have. And everyone counts on that might. Your, quote, little men, unquote, your Nazi friends, were not against National Socialism in principle. Men like me, who are the greater offenders. Oh, men like me who are the greater offenders. Not because we knew better, that would be too much to say, but because we sensed better. Wow, that's heavy. That's heavy. Sometimes you sense more than you know, right? Pastor Niemöller spoke for the thousands and thousands of men like me when he spoke too modestly of himself, and said that when the Nazis attacked the communists, he was a little uneasy, but after all, he was not a communist, and so he did nothing. And then they attacked the socialists, and he was a little uneasier, but still he was not a socialist, and he did nothing. And then the schools, the press, the Jews, and so on. And he was always uneasier, but he still did nothing. And then they attacked the church, and he was a churchman, and he did something, but then it was too late. Yes, I said. You see, my colleague went on, one doesn't see exactly where or how to move. Believe me, this is true. Each act, each occasion is worse than the last, but only a little worse. You wait for the next and the next. You wait for one shocking occasion, thinking that others, when such a shock comes, will join with you in resisting somehow. You don't want to act or even talk alone. You don't want to, quote, go out of your way to make trouble, unquote. Why not? Well, you are not in the habit of doing it. And it is not just fear of standing alone, that restrains you. It is also genuine uncertainty. Uncertainty is a very important factor, and instead of decreasing as time goes on, it grows. Outside in the streets, in the general community, everyone is happy. Quote, everyone, unquote. Everyone is happy. One hears no protest and certainly sees none. You know, in France or Italy, there would be slogans against the government painted on walls and fences. In Germany, outside the great cities, perhaps, there's not even this. In the university community, in your own community, you speak privately to your colleagues, some of whom certainly feel as you do. But what do they say? They say, quote, it's not so bad. Or, quote, you're seeing things. Or, quote, you're an alarmist. Hey, bye-bye. How are you? How are you? I'm reading a little bit.
Juice.
Want me to get you some juice? Okay. You are saying that this... and you are an alarmist. You are saying that this must lead to this, and you can't prove it. These are the beginnings, yes. But how do you know for sure when you don't know the end? And how do you know or even surmise the end? On the one hand, your enemies, the law, the regime, the party, intimidate you. On the other, your colleagues poo-poo you as pessimistic or even neurotic. You are left with your close friends who are naturally people who have always thought as you have. But your friends are fewer now. Some have drifted off somewhere or submerged themselves in their work. You no longer see as many as you did at meetings or gatherings. Informal groups become smaller. Attendance drops off in little organizations. And the organizations themselves wither. Now, in small gatherings of your oldest friends, you feel you are talking to yourselves, that you are isolated from the reality of things. This weakens your confidence still further and serves as a further deterrent to what? It is clear all the time that if you are going to do anything, you must make an occasion to do it. And then you are obviously a troublemaker. So you wait and you wait. But the one great shocking occasion when tens or hundreds or thousands will join you never comes. That's the difficulty. If the last and worst act of the whole regime had come immediately after the first and smallest, thousands, yes, millions, would have been sufficiently shocked if, let us say, the gassing of the Jews in 1943 had come immediately after the German firm, quote, German firm, unquote, stickers on the windows of non-Jewish shops in 1933. But of course, this isn't the way it happens. In between come all the hundreds of little steps, some of them imperceptible, each of them preparing you not to be shocked by the next step. Step C is not so much worse than step B. And if you did not make a stand at step B, why should you at step C? And so on to step D. And one day, too late, your principles, if you were ever sensible to them, I'll rush in on you. Oh my goodness. Alrighty, I guess that's all I have time to read today. And today is April 22nd, 2013. Let's see how we did.